So today we're looking at 3D printing for creatives. Now, this is a particularly interesting one if you are looking to use 3D printing not as an engineer or an entrepreneur, but more so someone who wants to express themselves through creative thinking. A few years ago, maybe 5-10 years ago, 3D printers were not accessible. And nowadays they really are. I mean, you can buy a really good 3D printer for less than $500, and there are so many resources online to just learn and really tinker and be able to develop your artistic flair. So this session will be a really interesting one where we don't look at the functionality of 3D printing, but more so we're going to take you through how can 3D printing be used in art. So with Alex Stawley on board for this session, we're going to bring an artistic flair to 3D printing technologies. So I'm really honored to work beside her and allow us to bring a new perspective into how technologies can be used to express yourself. So today we're going to explore 3D printing with engineers and artists. We're going to learn a bit of artistic flair from Alex in a session she delivers, and then we're going to look at how can you create a 3D printed keychain by transforming your artwork into an actual 3D model and then 3D printing it. It should be a lot of fun. Before we start, I just want to say a huge thank you to Diode Magazine and Core Electronics. Both of these companies have contributed some incredible prizes for you guys to win. Simply by participating in the activities today, you can go in the draw to winning all of these prizes you see on the right of the screen. Now, if you are the very first drawn winner, you will get one of each of these prizes, which means you'll get a 1-year Diode subscription magazine, you'll get a Makey electronics kit from Core Electronics, and you'll also have your keychain, the design that you submit, 3D printed and posted to you as a keychain. Now, if you are the next 4 winners, you win the remaining 3D printed keychain. So you also get your designs 3D printed and posted to you, which is really cool because it's something that you've created that we can 3D print and post back to you. Now, if you want to win the major prize draw, which has over $2,100 worth of prizes within it, including a DJI drone for yourself, a 2-week 3D printing program for yourself with us, and also for your school, you could win an AgTech machine vision workshop. Please go to our website. We'll put more information to how to win both of these prizes towards the end of the session. So really, what is 3D printing? Well, in simplistic terms, it's the process of creating 3-dimensional objects from digital files. Now, within that definition, there's so many things to consider. For example, what did you print that 3D object with? You can use different filaments and different types of plastics. Some printers print metal, some print so many different materials. Also, another thing you could look at is how did you get that digital file to print? Did you design it from scratch? Did you convert it from an image or some other model? So there's a lot of things you can go into 3D printing, and it does seem a little bit overwhelming if you delve in too deep. So we're going to start in the very simple terms of how does 3D printing actually work. So I've got a video here and we're going to run through it to show you exactly what 3D printing is and a little bit about how it's used.
So 3D printing is taking over the world, but how does it actually work? Well, it's quite similar to a normal printer, but then a little different. First, you don't put in an ink cartridge, but instead connect a spool of special printing material like plastic, rubber, or even metal. And you don't print boring text documents, but real-life models of what you've just made on your computer screen. Simply awesome. Right now, you can buy a 3D printer yourself and make complex 3D models with modeling software. But if you're not really a wizard with all that technical stuff, you can buy personalized 3D models online, like fancy toys, bracelets, or phone cases. Then send it to a 3D print shop nearby, choose a material, and pick up your own unique item. Sweet. In the medical world, they're developing 3D printers with special biological material. They're working on printing heart valves, ears, bones, skin, and even printed a small human kidney that can live for 3 months. It's just amazing. And hold on to your seats, they're developing a 3D printer that can print in space and are planning to print a moon base. A moon base! But, still, the coolest thing you can print with a 3D printer is another 3D printer. Booyah!
Whilst this video has been quite informative, I don't think you can truly understand how a 3D printer works until you see a 3D printer at work. Now this next clip is a beautiful montage of just that, 3D printers printing. They've actually shot it as a time lapse, and they've done some tricky camera work where they've taken a photo as they've parked the nozzle at each layer, and so it looks like the 3D print is growing all by itself, but I can assure you that this is the process of 3D printing. What's great about this video also is that you can appreciate that 3D prints aren't actually ever really printed fully solid, and you'll see some beautiful cross-hatching and different patterns that you can use in 3D printing to both maximize the strength as well as minimize the amount of plastic you use. There are literally so many ways you can apply 3D printing technologies. I mean, it could be something for as simple as designing something for around the home that can hold your phone while it charges. You could be 3D printing your own house very, very soon. You could have a 3D printed support so that you don't have that encumbersome cast when you're actually mending a broken bone. Or you could 3D print something that is actually a prosthetic that will actually work and be compatible, biocompatible to your own body to help you heal. There are literally so many ways that you can use 3D printing technologies. I want to give you an example that actually was my own when I was just learning 3D printing. And the example is that I needed to space a sensor just 19 millimeters away from where it currently was. Now, these photos are taken a few months ago where I actually needed to do some robotics work design. So these are, I'm not going to go into the details of robotics because today is about 3D printing, but I want to ask the question, what is the value of that simple 3D print and what does it cost? And those two questions are completely different. So I want you to have a bit of a think. Maybe you can estimate how much it costs and maybe you can think, well, how much was it worth to me? I'll give you a little bit to think about it. Now, this is a really interesting application because it's real life and this is what I actually used as an engineer, but it's a really good one to press a point of how valuable technology can be when you know about it. So the value is $800 and 3 weeks. Now, the reason why I got to $800 is because my boss had only known about steel. We've been using steel throughout the whole robotic rig development, and he didn't know about 3D printing. So his first option was, well, let's get it made in stainless steel. And that's how much that stainless steel would have costed. And it would have taken 3 weeks to get to us. Now, because I knew about 3D printing, I did a simple design, and I hope you're not impressed by that design. It's just a rectangular prism. I did a simple design. And that design was printed for 6 cents worth of plastic. And it only took 3 hours to print, and I could assemble that sensor back together. And that was essentially our solution. Now, after this funny story, my boss actually gave me a pay rise from thinking like this. But despite getting a pay rise, it was really interesting to show that just by knowing about 3D printing technology and not doing much design work, it was a simple rectangular prism, that I could actually show how valuable this technology was. So I've got a few more examples in the coming videos of just where 3D printing is transforming the world. Take a look.
Miniature self, First launched in Tokyo a few years ago, the 3D photo booth has a 48 camera setup to capture you from all angles. These mini-me's are quickly spreading around the world, and now you can even get a figurine made of yourself at Walmart. Prosthetics. On the upside, researchers are printing better and better prosthetics for those in need. Some children have reported that they feel like superheroes after getting their new mechanical hand assembled. As we progress into the future, the abilities of these prosthetics will reach a level that will make regular body parts inferior. Before we know it, the cyborg age will be upon us. An eagle's beak. Back in 2005, a bald eagle was shot in the face by a poacher. The damage was so bad that she could no longer eat or survive on her own. Scientists, engineers, and even a dentist have successfully designed her a new beak. She can now eat on her own, but special care is still needed for her survival. Body parts. In labs around the world, bioengineers have begun to print prototype body parts like ears, noses, artificial bone and skin, even an entire face. The first 3D skull transplant happened in the Netherlands. It was a process that took over 23 hours of surgery. The patient is back on track and shows almost no signs of having had any surgery at all. Medicine. 3D printed medicine is revolutionizing the field of prescription drugs. Now, doctors can deliver custom-made doses for patients with exact accuracy. Researchers believe that within the next decade, patients will be printing their own medication from home. Cars. The Urbi 2 is the first vehicle that has been manufactured from 3D printed parts. Since then, there has been some notably remarkable 3D printed cars with freshly innovative styles and futuristic designs. Food. How would you like to eat a 3D printed hamburger or pizza? Many people are now printing all kinds of foods using 3D printers, most notably a German retirement home. They print vegetables, pasta, and meat that melt in the mouth for patients who have trouble swallowing. Houses. These 3D printers aren't just limited to small fabrications. A Chinese company has constructed 10 single-story houses in less than 24 hours. Each house costs only $5,000. Also worthy of mention is a Minnesota architect who built a 3D printed castle made entirely of concrete. 3D printers. These 3D printers can essentially have babies. Incredibly enough, a 3D printer can print another 3D printer, allowing this technology to spread at a fast rate. What does the future hold for 3D printing? Only time will tell.
I hope you enjoyed learning about 3D printing and the applications it can have. We're going to jump into today's session, which will be to design your very own insect 3D printed keychain. Now, if you would like to go to the website, we do have a template that you can use, which is this one. And essentially it has the title and all the details necessary, as well as space for you to put your design in. It's a really helpful template. I recommend you go download it and print it and use it. But if not, feel free to get started with just a blank A4 piece of paper and write the same headings you saw in this template on your own A4 paper so you can get started instantly. Now for this session, I'm introducing Alex Stalling from Tinker. Alex has a decade of experience in everything to do with art, and she even uses 3D printing and laser cutting in her own artwork. So it should be a great session. I'm looking forward to what you create.
For this activity, you will need paper, an eraser, a drawing pencil. You will also need black markers and some bugs to reference. You can pause and draw the bugs that I have on the screen, or you can find another picture as your reference image. In this video, we're going to learn how to turn our drawings into something that can be 3D printed. I've chosen bugs and critters because they have really interesting little compartments and sections already. It's really important to remember when you're drawing something to be 3D printed, you want to keep it really simple. The first thing we need to do is mark up our actual drawing to start from. What I will do is draw a center line so it aligns straight down the center of my page. That will determine the size of the bug. I'm then going to mark little notches into that center line that will indicate the different areas. So that top is the actual top of its head, and then the next little line where it attaches to its middle abdomen, and then the next line is where the back part starts, and the bottom line is the end. Now I'm just filling in the pieces. I always like to start in the center part of the bug, but some people like to go top down or bottom up. It's really up to you what feels most natural. And all I'm doing here is drawing what I see in front of me. You might be drawing the same bug as me, or you might have chosen a different one. You want to look at the different components of the actual bug and see how they come together. So are they round? Do they have lots of little components? Are parts bigger or smaller than the others? Can you break them down into different shapes? Just looking at different parts of the bug and bringing it all together like this is really going to help inform our whole image. Remember, this is our sketch drawing, so don't press too hard, but at the same time, don't be worried about making mistakes. Use those mistake lines to inform where you're actually going to make the alterations for your finished bug picture. You can also play with some of the scale. You can exaggerate parts or make things smaller. Maybe you want to change up the legs, and instead of having all the little individual notches, you want to break them down into the bigger bands. Because remember, when we're 3D printing, we've got to be mindful about how much detail we include and exclude. With 3D printing, we are thinking about making something that's very similar to what would be used for a stamp or a stencil. You're thinking about a lot of positive and negative shapes. So you're not trying to capture all the little detail lines and dots and patterns that are on it. You're trying to get that overall shape that we can really simplify down so that when we do turn it into a print, we get a nice clean image. What I've noticed here, and you'll make these changes on your critter as you're drawing it, is that when I did the side parts off the face, I noticed that it was actually touching that front arm, or where I've put that front arm would be. So I've drawn over it and I've moved the front arm over to give everything its own space. This will help create a much cleaner and more defined print. You also want to make sure that your shapes and lines aren't too thin. We will come back over this with a marker, but it's really important to remember that you need thicker shapes because, again, you're going to be 3D printing it and you have to be thinking about the capabilities of the printer and how thin that can get before it becomes a little bit stringy or loses a bit of detail and it just doesn't print well. So you need something that's a nice in between where you're getting the detail of what you need to show your bug, but also at the same time not too fine a detail that it loses its integrity when it comes to printing it. You could also play with the whole positive and negative space by actually thinking about cutting out different elements of your print. So for me, because I'm printing in one color and I'm just thinking about using the black outline, anything that I leave white on my image is not going to be printed. Whatever is colored in that nice dark black solid colors, that's what's going to be printed. And you can use those cutout shapes to make some really interesting designs with your print. When coloring in with a marker, I like to go something that's not too fine but not too thick. I find that actually picking something that isn't a fine marker, so not like a biro or a really sharp pencil, but something that's a little bit thicker like a felt pen, will actually help me make sure that my lines are going to be thick enough to print. All that I do first is I outline the entire shape that I want to keep, and then I start to color in the parts that I think would look really cool filled in. Now that I have outlined my whole image, just before I color it in and finish off my design, I'm going to grab my rubber and erase any of those lines that I don't actually need. So we need to get rid of any of the sketchy marks, and that's going to help us later on when we turn it into a design to be printed. I'm going to start with the parts that I know I definitely want to be filled in with our print. So I'm going to color in all the really dark black parts of my image that I know will be a solid element when it's actually printed. Once I've done this, then I move on to looking at the picture as a whole and making my choice as to which parts of the picture I would like to be cut out and which parts I would like to be filled in. Once I've filled in all the parts that I know are definitely going to be solid, I then go along the back of my bug and I start thickening up that outside line. The reason I'm doing this is because I want to make sure that I have a really solid connection piece between all the parts that are actually going to be cut out or not printed. It's important that all your pieces join together much like they would with a stencil. If you have parts that are floating, then they won't actually be a part of the whole overall image. They will be a separate element. And again, to make sure they're nice and strong, you want to make sure that you draw thicker lines to connect them together. So remember, anything that I leave white is not going to be printed. It's everything that's colored in with that nice solid black outlines. That's the parts that's actually going to be 3D printed. With my back legs, because I've decided I would like a component that's actually hollow or not printed, I am making sure that those outside lines are nice and thick again so that they're not going to fall apart and that there's enough information there for the 3D printer to actually print it. And I'm doing that by just going over the lines and thickening them. Also make note that I'm making sure that there is a nice distance between the body and the legs when I'm doing this. If you make that gap in between those two faces too small, then that's also going to have some problems later on when you try to print it. When you're thinking about space and allowing enough for it to print, you also need to think about the space around the bug, not just the space directly that draws the bug's picture. So what I mean is that space in between the legs and the critter's body. That needs to have enough gap so that it prints nicely. And just before you put your pens down to finish, have one last look at your critter. Look at any of the lines. Do you want to change anything? Do you need to thicken it up? And there you go. You're done and ready for the next step.
So I hope you followed along with Alex and done your very own insect. Now, I'm going to use Alex's insect because I think it looks absolutely incredible, but these same steps could be used to convert your own insect into a 3D print. Now, what we have to do here is convert an image file into a file that a 3D modeling software can use. And it's just because the 3D modeling software can only understand certain file types. So I use this website called picsvg.com, and it's a free one online that you can just go and upload your picture here. And when you upload it, it'll actually automatically convert your image to the SVG file that we need for the 3D modeling software to understand. Now, the way it works is it looks at certain changes of color in your image, for example, white to a different shade of white, and a different shade of white to black, and it detects the edges. And so obviously there's a little bit of scatter that has come up as errors, and that's just how the software works. To make this work the best, you need to make the colors you draw as different as possible to the background, and hence why we've given you the instructions to do black colors on white. If you used any other color, it just wouldn't work as well. Now, when you upload your photo, you can change from different filters. The invert filters here just give you the edge of what you've drawn. So if I 3D printed that, it would just be the edge outline, and that wouldn't be very strong. So I'm going to use the ready filters, which is essentially the entire 3D print is mostly black, which is what will be printed. So from there, I can just look at that and there's no errors around. So I've drawn it quite nicely here, or Alex has drawn it quite nicely here. And we can just press download. Now that's downloaded here down the side. And we go back to our modeling software here. Now, this modeling software is where we can now import our design. Now, there's so many awesome things about this software. This software is called Tinkercad. It's free and it's online. Essentially, you can jump on, create an account, and design almost anything you could possibly imagine. I'm not going to go into the details of how to design on this because we want to focus on just using some quick tools to create some 3D prints from your own artwork. But there are so much things you can do on here, and we do a lot of other programs that we actually teach students how to use Tinkercad. So what we want to do is actually import our design. I'm going to choose the file, and as you can see back here, that the file types we need are these files, and we now have an SVG file from our conversion. So we can choose that file and open it, and you can see it's sitting here. And I'm not going to touch any parameters here. I'm just going to click import, and it's going to come in. It's going to be quite a big design because we haven't told it how big we want this. So it's sitting just here. And from here, we can kind of customize even our artwork. So we've got another layer of artistic flair we can put onto this. So I actually love this design, so I'm not going to change it too much, but I might want to resize it. For example, maybe I want it to be 120 mils by 120 mils either side. So it's a nice kind of squarish keychain. And I might want to put a hole in it. Maybe I would really like to have a small hole down the bottom that I can essentially have a keychain or a key ring hanging off. But I love the fact how Alex has drawn it, and I think I can use these holes here for the keychain. So I'm going to undo that, but you could do so many different things with it now that you've got it in Tinkercad. So that's how you convert it from your artwork into a 3D print. Now we're going to chuck it on the printer and see how it turns out. So for those who haven't seen a 3D printer print, this is quite a simple method of essentially heating up plastic and pushing it through a nozzle. So what happens is you've got a roll of filament, which looks like this, that has a gear that actually pushes it through a heating element and heats this plastic, and this one is PLA, you get different types of plastic, but it heats this plastic to about 200 degrees, maybe 220 degrees, and pushes it through that nozzle. And what you can see here is layer by layer, we are forming a 3D print. And this is our final insect keychain. And you can see it looks really nice. In terms of how it's been drawn, Alex has done an incredible job. She's enabled the black lines to be thick enough that this design is actually really, really strong. I mean, it's got a little bit of flex in it, which is actually really cool, but this thing is not going to break easy. So I'm really, really happy with how this turned out. And I'm really interested to see how your designs turn out. Now onto the prize giveaway. Now, before I start this, I just want to say a huge thank you to Diode and Core Electronics for being the major sponsors of this event and giving us such awesome prizes to give away. Now, the prizes are on offer are just listed above me, and we're going to pick 5 random people from all the people who submit for today's activities, and this will happen each day. Now, of those 5 winners, the very first drawn student will get one of everything listed here. The 4 other winners will get one of this prize here for the 4 remaining prizes of this one. Now, how do you submit? Well, it's quite simple. The first thing is follow along with today's activities and take a photo of your work. Make sure in that photo you have the details such as your name, your grade, and your postcode so we can see who's actually submitting their design for this competition. Step 2 is to share that photo with us. The easiest way to do that would be to post it in the Facebook comments below this video. Or if you want to email it to us, feel free to do so. Our email address is info@integratedSTEM.com.au. If you are emailing it to us, please be sure to use the heading of the session. Now, the heading of the session is above on this slide at the very top. So just use that in the subject box of your email. Lastly, be sure that you have liked our Facebook page so that you can see the announcement of the winners. Now, if you need to find our Facebook page, you can search us using the @integratedSTEM.com.au on Facebook, and you should find us. Very lastly, be sure that you get your entries in before they close. The closing dates are here now, and then the winners will be announced the following day at 5 p.m. For the major prize giveaway, you could win over $2,100 worth of prizes. For yourself, you could win a DJI drone, as well as a 2-week 3D printing program with us. And you could win exclusively for your school, our Machine Vision Ag Tech workshop. Now, registrations do close on August 28 at 1 p.m. and the winner will be drawn on the same day at 5 p.m. So to register, simply go to this website link here. It'll probably take you less than a minute to do so. On the website, there's 2 ways you can submit your entry. All the details are on the website. If you do both, you double your chances and you get 2 entries. I hope you enjoyed this session, particularly on how you can transform the way that you express art through the technology of 3D printing. If you did, may I please ask you to help us share this with other tech-interested kids, either by sharing this website, sharing this video on Facebook, or even just sharing your experience of your child with other parents who have children of similar interests. If you are interested in developing more skills in 3D design, we have tons of 3D printing and 3D design programs on our website, which are either developed as a school holiday program or an after-school program. We would love to help you delve further into these technology skills. Otherwise, I just want to say a huge thank you for joining us with these sessions, and we'll see you in the next one.